the LinkedIn Live series of Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, CEO of WBC. For those of you that don't know, WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 80 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders, building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. WBC also lives our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, staff, board of directors, WBC champions include more than 34% people of color. And every one of our action initiatives has DEI goals for 2025 and 2030. So please check the chat for our action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change and impact. And please always join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showcasing leaders committed to allyship, inclusivity, and driving corporate purpose. So as we all know, women play a critical role in the workforce, particularly in frontline roles, which are often some of the most important and toughest roles in companies. According to Catalyst 2023, Women on the Front Line, Enabling Them to Thrive, Stay, and Perform report, companies have an opportunity to increase morale and position themselves for better retention by supporting their frontline employees, particularly women. So we are delighted today to be joined by two of our incredible partner organizations, Catalyst and the Women of Color Retail Alliance. And from Catalyst, we have Leela Wilson, who is the Chief Revenue Officer. And from Women of Color Retail Alliance, we have the founder and CEO, Kimberly Lee Miners. So Leela and Kimberly, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
Thank you, Gwen. Happy to be
so
here.
Thrilled. Yeah, happy to be here. Happy February. Happy Black History Month to everybody. And I'm glad we all have a little bit of sunshine coming in through the windows. So Leela, I'm going to start with you. You know, we just referenced the report, and we know that Catalyst has done some amazing work around companies, how they support their frontline employees, and they have a specific focus on manufacturing, food services, and retail. So can you share with us some of the highlights of the research, and what are you hearing from employees on the front lines in 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gwen. Well, for those of you not familiar with Catalyst, let me just quickly say we're a global nonprofit. We've been around about 60 years, and our focus is trying to drive workplace inclusion for women. We think if workplaces work for women, they really will work for everyone. And we do that through the research that we're going to talk about, end-to-end solutions, as well as an active community of almost 500 organizations around the world. So to get to your question, I mean, we already knew that these were some of the toughest jobs and often have the highest levels of turnover. But what we found was really 4 interesting things that we heard from women. First of all, in these roles, women's physical bodily needs are not always considered or really thought about. So things like, you know, are there lactation spaces? Do uniforms fit, depending on the environment they're in? Second, there's a lot of need to really think differently about scheduling. We know women disproportionately take on the caregiving responsibilities, be it elder care or childcare, but these schedules for women are not really conducive to those other commitments they have in their lives. The next thing is about career growth opportunities and advancement. What does that look like in these environments, and how do we better clarify and communicate those opportunities? And then last but not least, a need to improve the role of the frontline manager in supporting women in these roles so they really have the system around them to think about their needs. So those were a few of the things that really came through as opportunities where perhaps not enough attention has been paid so far.
And Kimberly, I know this is kind of where you're working on. You want to talk a little bit about react to that? What are you seeing as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm buzzing over here. So, and thank you for having us. And, you know, I'll talk about WACRA a little later, but, you know, what's really interesting and what we have found is at the intersections of gender and race, it becomes even more complicated. Like those are 4 issues that are very important across the board at the macro level, but it becomes more complicated in that because of the lack of management and leadership, or the smaller numbers, the understanding that is necessary for the nuances at those intersections kind of goes away, right? And most companies that we've worked with are focused on the corporate side of their business. And we have to remind them that the front line is where the action is, right? Because especially in retail, your frontline workers are they're your meat and potatoes. Like, they know your customer, they are representing your brand, but they're getting the least attention. And so, those are some of the things that we're actually working on with our retail leaders. Like, okay, yes, I understand corporate is here. However, you cannot not focus on the front line, because that's really the crucial part of the business. They're out there. And one of the other things that has come to mind with frontline workers is just the treatment that they're getting from other customers because of the state of our politics and how we communicate these days, and everyone's so angry. And oftentimes those are the frontline workers who get the brunt of that. And so we try to work on making them more protective of themselves, as well as working with management and teaching them how to protect their frontline workers.
Yeah, I'd love to build on that, Kimberly, because I couldn't agree more. And I think that point around the intersection, as you think about other elements of someone's identity and how that manifests here, I think is really important. Interestingly, just like you described, that actually led a Catalyst to think of two solutions to help solve a little bit of what you're sharing. So one, we have this report that anyone can go read on our website, catalyst.org. We created a thing called Windows to the Frontline for the corporate audience to really center around what are these problems and how do you lift up these voices of women that have not been heard enough? Because to your point, I would argue they've been kind of neglected in terms of this whole story, and they really are critical. But then the second part of the solution set was we created these scenario-based micro learnings we're calling moments that matter to bring to life the scenarios, the real examples you're describing that might manifest from a customer or might manifest internally from a colleague. And how do you help managers and employees think through how to work through those real life situations that actually create a lot of burden and tax on these individuals? So we try to think of the two sort of pieces of that, because I think, to your point, you need to solve for both to be able to really engage and ensure these women have the best experience possible.
Well, to that point, with WACRA, which is the Women of Color Retail Alliance, which we are a national nonprofit, and our focus, very much like Catalyst, is on inclusive leadership, getting women of color into the pipeline. And I often am asked, well, why are you only focused on women of color? And the reason is because that's where the opportunity is. Because when we look at the levels, right, and women predominate, they are the leader worker in retail, whether it's corporate, which is 60%, or frontline field work, that is 70%. But once you get past, and it's pretty equal at the beginning, but once you get past that first level of management, it falls off significantly. And so by the time you get to leadership, VP or above, it's, I think, 37% of leaders in this industry are women, but only 6% are women of color. And so that's why we focus on women of color, because we are really focused on all women, but we can't say that if not all women have access. And so what we have done, much like what you were talking about, Leela, is we have the twofold. It's like a bookends. We've created a program that addresses the actual worker, right? Don't get left behind, right? And here are the things that you need to do so that you are front of mind. People see you, because often when we are treated differently, we tend to think if we work harder and put our head down, we will get the acknowledgement and the focus that we need so that we can move forward, when it's actually the opposite. And so we teach that. And then on the flip side of that, we work with managers and the leaders to show how not to leave anyone behind, right? Because we're moving so quickly in this industry. Oftentimes, I don't think it's malice. I mean, and for the most part, I think we just don't think, and we do whatever's easiest and we keep going. And so having focus on both sides, so that not only do you feel like you're a part of this brand, but now you're you're the CEO of your own career. Like, you know how to advocate for yourself. You know what additional training you might need. You know how to take feedback. And then on the other side is, how do you give feedback? Because that's often comes up a lot too at the intersections. I don't feel comfortable giving feedback. Well, then you're not doing your job. And so let's give you some tools so that you can do your job.
So I want to kind of come into that kind of one side of the bookend, because what I'm hearing sort of from the, I'll call it the organizational side, right? Is there's a commitment piece. I've got to see the frontline workers. I've got to understand I've got to understand their needs. There's sort of like, maybe there's a training piece. I'm hearing training, right? I'm hearing there's a communications piece, understanding what's happening on the front lines. And I know certain industries, often there's a separate pipeline. There's like the corporate pipeline. Then there's the sort of worker pipeline, depends on what industry you're in. Like in a construction industry, there's the builders, and then there's the finance people, right? So like these kind of separate pipelines. And so, what is it, I know that it takes a variety of factors, right? Is it more and better leaders and more sort of frontline leaders? Is it training? Is it building out that communication? Like, what are some of the things that are happening that are working to kind of create that both that communication channel, but the ability to really kind of build the strong frontline workers in the company's sort of appreciation? And I heard you say, Leela, too, frontline workers don't often get those executive leadership opportunities that you might get in the corporate headquarters. So what are some of the innovations, or what are some of the things that the companies can do?
There's so much. There's so much. When I came in this industry 30 years ago, it was connected. Right. I went through Macy's executive training program. I had to work in the store. Like, I had to lead in the store, and I learned how to lead when I was in the store, and I learned how to communicate with the corporate office. And, the front line was very important because we had the information. It has changed significantly, and the industry has become so siloed that they're separate. And that's another thing that I hear often that we're helping companies with. Oh, but how do we get them into the pipeline? Because we have, and the expectations are a little different in what they're asking. And so I think that, I'll say, like, Urban is a great company to reference. They've done a really great job in working to cut down those silos and to make the corporate and the frontline one team. And so there's communication. They have representatives at certain meetings, and they understand that they're one brand. So if you work for Urban Outfitters, you in the store, you're also in corporate, you're one brand. And I think that's innovative, which is crazy to say, because 30 years ago they were doing that, but it kind of went away. And so I think that for brands to be relevant, to be customer centric, and to be employee centric, they need to break down those walls. And it's easier for me to say than to be done, but it is possible with the right partnership. We can come in, and this has lots of tools, but with the right partnership, I would say that's the number one thing. It's about communication and community. And if you build one brand community, it's going to move together. Whereas if you don't have that, the communication's not right. And then you have these breakdowns where people feel underappreciated, or they are underappreciated, or they don't know how to move through the system.
Yeah, and I would maybe build to add another piece of the equation, which is, and we've talked about this earlier, how do you then equip those frontline managers to have the information they need and the ability to communicate what these growth opportunities could look like? Because, there might be different expectations of what people want to do, right? Everyone has different goals and things that will make their career experience rewarding and what they want from it. So I think equipping them at the same time, so that you not only have maybe the opportunities combined and you can see a path, but also understanding what questions to be asking, understanding how you can get inside the needs of the employees that you're supporting, so that they feel like they have an advocate and someone who understands the goals and ambitions they have, whatever they may be, I think is a critical piece. And I think we could do more to equip those individuals so they feel comfortable having those conversations and then supporting these women.
I agree. I don't know that, and this is new conversation. I feel like it's new. We're having conversations about preparation and curiosity, and what does that mean, and what does the term leader mean, because I think it's overused, because there are stages in every business where you need a manager and you need a leader, and they're not always the same. But I don't know that enough is being put into training so that managers at that first promotion know, okay, so this is what it means. That's really what should happen. And that's not expensive, but I think it sounds daunting if you don't have it. But making sure that you're training your employees, your associates, they're your brand, they're your community. You're training them for the next step. And once they get to the next step, there needs to be that approach, as opposed to, oh, this person's a really hard worker, and I think we need to promote them because we have a store that's open that needs a really hard worker over there, right? Like, let's be more intentional and mindful and strategic to build bench.
Yeah.
Well, and the leadership being different than the management, right? And really understanding that. And there are different types of trainings, to your point, right? And there's also different how you promote, who you promote, and why you promote, right? So they're kind of both in there on that. And what, how important, we are, so as you both know, because you're a part of Women Business Collaborative, we're an alliance. We've got 80 organizations, including the both of you, right? But we're also a network, right? And so you talked a little bit, Kimberly, about partnerships. Where can some of, for the organizations in our group and other organizations, how important are those sort of partnerships? And then is networking an important part of this conversation at any level?
Yes, and yes, and yes. We're an alliance too, right? So we're the retail alliance, and people ask, well, why would you be an alliance? Because it's all about collaboration, because we can't do anything by ourselves. And not that we can't do anything by ourselves. We can't do anything and everything by ourselves. The numbers, the disparity, the issues, they're too many to ignore. And in order to really make a difference, that's what I love about the collaborative, because every time I get together with the partners, there's someone else who's doing something really interesting that would enhance something that we're doing. And I think that that's something that more needs to happen. Whether you're in a company or you are an organization like ours, partnership is crucial to the success. You need partners to achieve your goals. I absolutely believe that. I think that more people need to be open to it, because it's less about who got the prize and more about what was the outcome. And anything that is meaningful needs to be measurable. And sometimes, you might be doing it, but you don't have the tools to measure it. But then you partner with the catalyst and they've been measuring it. And so you can say, all those things you need to look at to see, where are my gaps and who do I need to partner with to fill those gaps? Because you don't have to be the one-armed paper hanger. That's what partnerships are for. And networking, I didn't know about networking. I didn't come from, parents who were in this space and could teach me how to network. I had to learn along the line. And I talk to people all the time, doesn't matter what stage they are in their career, of how important networking is, but it shouldn't be transactional. To me, it's about building relationships and community to support whatever is happening that needs to change. Because wherever you walk into, you should want it to be better when you walk out. And that, to me, that happens through collaboration, strategy, training, learning, and curiosity.
Love it. Leela. Yeah, I would echo all of those points. I think the other thing to think about is, we've all got slightly different focus areas, right? As you can see from this conversation, but there's a lot that unites us and we all have the same destination and end goal in mind, right? So I think, how do we use the collective power of action and shining a light on areas like the frontline women that have been neglected to really move us forward and power change? So at the end of the day, we all want to see, to the outcome point, meaningful change happen. And I think we all play a unique role getting there. And the more we can bring us together to do that, I think the more impact we can have.
Absolutely.
Which leads us to kind of the last thing as we end these. And then, like you said, I think we could be here for another couple hours talking about all the great things and opportunities. But, But on that, what is the call to action, right? And I will pick up on one of your words, Leela, too. It could be, what's the outcome you want to see, right? But what's the call to action? Kimberly, I want to start with you. What's your call to action to, companies, organizations?
So my call to action to companies is that you don't get your bottom line will not happen. It will not be positive if the people who work for you are not happy and productive. And don't underestimate the word happy. And so my call to action is if you can't see it because for whatever reason, reach out, right? Reach out, ask for help, put it out there. And there are so many organizations that can come in to help you do it. It doesn't have to be this incredibly expensive endeavor on your behalf. Like we're talking about collaborations. Call to action is acknowledge you have an issue and then ask for help.
Yeah, that's great. And mine would be listen to the voices of frontline women and go out there and expose yourself to those women and hear them. And then identify one micro action you can take. I think sometimes it can get overwhelming. We think we've got to do everything tomorrow. Find one action and commit to making that happen.
Yeah.
I love that. So on that one action, this conversation is one of many we've been having a collaborative. We are going to continue with you, and we'd like to also continue with the audience to continue throughout 2024 and 2025. But let's start with that action. Let's see what we can do together. And I think it's the communication and listening and to bring in the partnership and collaboration and alliance that Kimberly has Catalyst and WBC is let's do this together. So Kimberly and Leela, thank you so much. And I apologize to everyone, that is all that we have time for. So I invite the audience to wbcollaborative.org to learn more about WBC's initiatives to increase women in the C-suite and boardroom. And so leaders and managers to address the underrepresentation of women in STEM and available capital for women, and advance this pipeline of women leaders to bring gender and pay parity, equity, and diversity inclusion to the business landscape. So today we talked about retail manufacturing. This is fantastic. Join us weekly to keep up to date on our next guest, our progress, and the movement for gender equity in business and everything by following us on social media at WB Collaborative on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Have a wonderful Thursday.